Welcome to another episode of The Pulse on Real Estate with Brian Pate. In this podcast, we meet with mortgage lenders, builders, agents, and influencers in the real estate industry to share ideas and opinions. This podcast is unscripted, unfiltered, and unapologetic. Each episode dives deep into the trends shaping the real estate market. From market analysis to investment strategy, we cover it all. Whether you are a seasoned professional or just starting out, there's something for everyone. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good morning, everybody. It's Brian Pate from the Pate Realty Group and Brian Pate Seminars in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and welcome to the Pulse on Real Estate, where we are unscripted, unfiltered, and unapologetic. I've got a good friend of mine on the podcast today. I want to welcome Matt Szalecki from Family Building Company. Woo! Way to go,
Thanks
Matt.
for having me.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad you could take some time out. Why don't you take a minute to tell us a little bit about your company and your history in the real estate business and all of that good stuff?
No, sure. Just the short version.
It's up to you, man. We got plenty of time here, whatever you want to do.
So Family Building Company is a local home builder in the Raleigh, North Carolina market. We build primarily owner-occupant and some amount of investor homes within about 45 minutes to an hour of RDU airport. Our average sales price is about $265,000. So you will more likely find us in Roxborough, Lewisburg, Franklinton, Smithfield, Dunn, Fuquay, more often than you find us in Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill and those kind of places.
Okay.
We're a family-owned and operated company. First-time buyers and helping people build wealth through real estate are really the core of what we do. My dad builds the homes. I buy the land, inspect the homes, and work with the real estate agents to get them sold. And I've got next year, I will be 10 years in the real estate business. Started as a broker, did some corporate leadership, worked for some publicly traded companies, did the executive job in real estate thing, and I love being a real estate investor and a home builder.
Understood. It's nice to always go back to the roots of what your passion is. That's for sure.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what your market is, because that's unique. There are a lot of the builders these days are trying to jump into more of the luxury homes. Custom home building is a little bit more difficult, obviously, because of the caliber of client that you're dealing with. There can be challenges with, let's call them persnickety. That's a good word. That's one of my favorite words. But tell us a little bit why you chose to participate in the marketplace where you do.
So when we were just starting, it was because we were broke. My dad and I started this company with $4,000, which is not enough money to start a home construction company, and yet we did it anyway.
Got it.
So we started building for hire for other people, whether it was small custom homes or investors hiring us to build, or we did some renovations and helped people do their flip homes and that sort of thing. And in the early go, the reason we wanted to do smaller homes at lower price points was risk management decision for us. We said, in 2008, 50% of builders went out of business because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so I want to make sure that the best way to figure out not being in the wrong place at the wrong time is just not being in the wrong place. If we build a $250,000 or $300,000 house and we can't sell it because the market explodes and just goes kaboom and there's no more buyers, we can rent it out and survive. We can live to fight another day. Build a $700,000 house. You try and rent it out, you're going to be negative cash flow by $3,000 a month, and I was not prepared to sustain that. So it was a risk management thing. As we went on and grew, we started doing a whole lot of different things. We did some custom homes. We tried to work for some people who wanted to build some higher end homes. And what we found was that, for one, we were very good at building the first time buyer or rental property type home. We were able to do it very high quality, very efficient, very cost controlled, and we were able to bring in excess of value to that part of the market. We also know there's infinite demand in the price band we work in. There's never enough supply to serve the number of people who are looking for $265,000 average homes. And lastly, we got out of the custom home business because we found the patience, the scale, the level of systems, and the the headache that comes with being a custom builder was just not worth what you could get for it. We were regularly working with, people who came to us with a $500,000 budget and $800,000 appetite, and
Right.
when the gap couldn't be bridged, it became my fault.
Right.
And I just wore all of those headaches and all the stress all the time. It wasn't worth it.
Gotcha. So tell me about your initial experience in the real estate business. You said you'll be licensed for 10 years next year. Tell me what the beginning was like. What were the biggest challenges that you faced?
So when I started in real estate, my biggest challenge was money. I was not thoughtful when I got into the business. I just I was working as a manager for Guitar Center, making a modest, approximately median income type salary in Durham, and uh, the company was getting super corporate. No one was having a good time, and I had found my glass ceiling. I was not getting promoted for another 10 or 15 years, just
Got
because
it.
that's the way that world works. Uh, I bought a house. My friend who had left Guitar Center and become a real estate agent was my agent. He helped me buy a house, and he was like, "Man, you got a great personality for this kind of stuff. I've worked with you before. You'd be awesome in real estate." And so I was like, "Okay." And I went and signed up for real estate at HPW school. I got my license, and the day after I got my license was my last day of work, and I walked out of a W-2 job with about 3,500 bucks in the bank and said, "I'm doing real estate."
So
Uh,
it was make it or break it, wasn't it?
yeah, there's something to be said for burning the bridges, right? I didn't really have a path to turn back. I had to figure out how to be successful. And a lot of that, the first 6 months was, living on a credit card, being very, very frugal and modest, and trying to pick up some side gigs. And, I did some like broker price opinions and stuff for people on the side just to get a little bit of cash moving. But it was 6 months till I had that first closing. I walked into the business with 10 people I thought were going to buy and sell right now. Like I thought I had leads ready to go. And then you learn that, it really takes time for people to come through, and they don't always do what they were said they were planning to do and all that kind of stuff. So,
Lots of people talk the talk, but not many walk the walk. That's for sure, most definitely. So, and so walk us through the progression of your career. So, how did you get from selling real estate and being a brand new broker, suffering through that first 6 months that a lot of people do in the beginning of their career, and then where did the path come for you? How did what is that progression look like? Because we know success is not a straight line, and a lot of times there are failures before you get those successes. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw in that path?
yeah. So, I guess just to continue that story along, uh, I was putting in the work every day, but I didn't have closings those first 6 months. And so I was picking up a second job I can do on some evening weekend kind of stuff just to get some cash moving. And I started shopping for a real estate team to join. It's like at this point, I just need some lead flow. I need a more sure path to closings if I'm going to stick this out, because if it goes too much longer, I'm going back to the job world and I'll never forgive myself.
Mhm.
Um, so the person who actually gave me the most encouragement and helped me realize I knew I was going to make it through was both of our friend Peter Kaima. So
Uh-huh.
I talked with
Yep.
Kaima about joining his team. It was the end of 2015, and it just didn't cross paths for whatever reason. I think the main thing was that I was looking to make a move now, and as you know, the Keller Williams hiring process takes a very long time. We're going
Yes.
to interview, and then we'll talk about scheduling the next interview. Then we'll interview again. Then I need to meet your family. You need to meet mine. We're going to go out to dinner. And I was like, when can I start? When can I
Right.
start? So,
Right.
um, but I've had a great admiration for Peter ever since that time, and he's been a cheerleader of mine. I always appreciate that. I
Peter's a
ended up
good
joining.
cheerleader for lots of people in this business.
Amen. Uh, I ended up joining Keith Bliss's team out of KW Carey.
Yeah.
Uh, he kind of fast tracked that process, understanding where I was, and he was looking to add someone today as well. So we went through quickly. And it's kind of funny how these things work. As I joined his team and committed to the 50-50 split or whatever it was, I forget the
Right.
percentages. Uh, all my spheres started buying homes,
Right.
which is how it always happens, right? But you know, I that kind of put me on a fast track. It gave me a new injection of energy. I got a whole bunch of, I got some good business out of being on the team too. So it was a win-win. I did only stick with that for maybe about 4 or 6 months on Keith's team, but I learned a lot and will always appreciate him for that time. Uh, Went over to HPW and started a team with a buddy, Matt Runn, who has now left the Triangle. He lives
Right.
in Indiana now.
Yep.
We started a team. By the end of the year, we had the #1 team in HPW carry. And to be fair, that's not the team that Jim Allen and Ida Turbot are out of. It's a smaller office and is a
Right.
different profile of agent that was over there in West Cary. But we did, I think, maybe 10 or 12 million bucks there, which is, a staggering difference, my second 6 months from my first 6 months in real estate.
Sure.
And then we were paying so much money to the brokerage. I think our team gave HPW about 80 grand in 2016. So we just took a leap of faith and went over to EXP. And we were the first two agents in the Triangle at EXP. There was one other guy, but he wasn't really doing business yet. He was just trying to do a bunch of recruiting lunch and learns.
Gotcha.
So we were kind of tasked with putting EXP on the map locally, which was an interesting time
Sure.
because there was a lot of recruitment and there's a lot of hatred towards that recruitment type of activity. It was KW on steroids, but with none of the ethics control to it. No systems and processes. It was just spam, spam, spam. Send out the blast emails, send out the blast text messages, have ISAs call in agents and all that stuff. And so we were trying to grow that. And basically, Matt was the recruiter growing EXP, and I was the agent trying to show people that EXP was a real company with humans who sell real estate in it. So my job was to produce. I joined the board of realtors at RRAR, and we ran on like that for probably 2 years. 2018, I moved to Richmond, Virginia, and didn't tell anybody because all my business was here. My wife got a job opportunity that we decided to pursue, so we moved to Richmond so she could take that job, and I just drove down here 3 or 4 days a week to work.
Wow. That's a serious sacrifice because Richmond's about 2 hours away from the Triangle.
Yeah,
So
it was
you're
about two
talking
and a
about a
half. Yep.
4 hour round trip.
Yep. So sometimes I would stay overnight. Sometimes I wouldn't, but I was still actively doing business here. And in March of that year, I'd lived in Richmond for 30 days when I accepted the job to be a BIC for EXP in the Triangle.
Wow.
And I'm sorry, someone from EXP is corporate is going to watch this now. I'm sorry I didn't tell you I didn't live in the place you hired me to work. Uh, so and I had a case of right place, right time. I was hungry, looking to grow, looking to prove myself in a company that was exponentially growing, and I kind of got to ride their wave up the corporate ladder. So, I've been in real estate for 3 years. I'm a broker in charge. 6 months later, I'm the regional manager of the East Coast for EXP. So now I'm hiring and training all the other BICs from Maine to Florida on something I just myself learned,
Right.
which was a very educational, fast-paced dynamic. It was a lot of fun. 2019, EXP had gone, they uplisted to NASDAQ, and that changed the company for me. What it was like to work there. It had no impact on the agents. They were all having a great time. Working there, when a company hits NASDAQ, HR becomes more important. Legal and loss prevention becomes more important. The accounting department becomes more important. And from where I sat, it felt like it was becoming less and less of a by agents for agents type of initiative. And it was feeling more like a stuffy corporate environment where people were all trying to, step on each other's toes and throw each other under the bus to get credit and move up the ladder and fight
Right.
for the next VP job that opens.
Right.
So I left. I went and I joined Fathom. And when I reached out to Fathom and said, hey, I have experience in virtual brokerage operations for a public company. You guys are trying to be all of those things and already are most of them. Can I talk to you guys about it? And they're like, yeah, do you know our headquarters is in Cary? I was like, nope, didn't know that. So, corporate HQ is 15 minutes from my house. We hit it off. I joined Fathom. It was the same job at national scale because Fathom was a smaller company. So I was their national director of brokerage operations. And I was basically tasked with cleaning up and establishing proper systems so they'd be ready to go public and scale with some systems in place because it had been organic quality growth over years instead of the exponential thing. Uh, uh, was there for maybe 6 or 8 months. Had a good time, made a lot of friends. COVID happened, and their IPO got delayed, and I was the last in, first out person who was dropped off there.
Got it.
That led me to KW. So I cast a wide and far net at that point because I knew a lot of people in a lot of places after all that. Decided to land with Jay Crow, who owns 6 KW market centers. And, I called Peter Kaima, who worked there. I asked some agents around the market, and everyone said, Jay's a good human being. He's a good guy to be in business with. He does what he says he's going to do. He doesn't let money get in the way of arguments. You'll be good here. So I came on board with Jay to be his COO of the J Crow enterprise, which is market centers. He's got some mortgage and title joint ventures, and some other businesses that we started along the way. Worked with him for a couple of years. While I was working with him, I also took an opportunity with KW Corporate, KWRI for the KW people.
Right.
And I helped them to create a virtual brokerage that would span the country, that would sit next to all of the market center that are franchised and technically separate entities and separately owned offices. So they would have kind of a patchwork solution to help expansion teams, which were leaving KW to go to a single brokerage because it was just so much easier.
Right.
Did that for a year or two, and I just burned myself out. And I always knew I wasn't going to run that after I built it. I wanted to help them build it, get it set up, and step back out. So after that ran its course, I was back to just working with Jay. The building company really started to grow, and last summer, I walked away from all of it. And I've just been a freelancing ambassador for affordable new home construction ever since.
That's outstanding. That's outstanding. So one of the we of course met at Keller Williams, and like you, Jay was a mentor to me in the growth of my business. I started working with Jay in 2003 when I was a manager at Fonville Morrissey here in Raleigh, and so we've both got that background. And one of the things that Jay always taught me was to know what's getting ready to happen. And he likened the difference to the game of chess versus checkers. A grandmaster in chess is thinking 10 to 12 moves ahead. And that was always what Jay taught me. And I know you're a guy that does that. You kind of do that organically. For me, it's a little bit forced. So can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the market and your interpretations of what we're seeing now, and where you expect us to be over the next 2 years? Obviously, I know you don't have a crystal ball. My crystal ball from January of 24 shattered and broke into many pieces. Because I was thinking we'd be below a 6 handle on interest rates, and here we are still at 7, even after some rate cuts. So what are you seeing going on? I know you're very well connected nationally. What are you hearing? What is on the mind of the other people that you're talking with, and what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, and I'll start this by saying that the thing I've learned the most is that there is no such thing as predicting the market, because for all the predictions the gurus and the experts and even people like you and me might make, there are other people who actually get to make the decisions that take the market where they choose for it to go. And so unless you can read minds, you can't really predict what's going to happen in the market next. I also thought we'd be, I thought back when rates were being raised, I was certain the Fed was going to overraise them, kill the economy, and have to drop them back down to re-stimulate everything. And it was going to be like a 6-month problem. Obviously didn't happen. Then we were promised all year that rates were going to come back down. The Fed said they're going to cut rates, they're going to cut rates, they're going to cut rates. And then they cut the rates and the mortgage rates didn't change because the industry already knew that.
Right.
It's already priced in. So uh, my best guess is that, we're going to get buyer fatigue here where buyers are just tired of hearing about the interest rates and they just say, okay, it's time to shit or get off the pot. Can I
Yes.
say shit on your podcast?
Yes, you can. Absolutely. Unfiltered,
Uh,
unscripted, unapologetic, all of it.
So I think buyers are just at this point where if I want to buy a house, I guess I just have to buy a house because there's not going to be some magic moment where the rates come down to 4.5% and I can buy a house, but everybody else can't, and I won't have to do multiple offers and all that kind of stuff. We can't have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah, it's kind of like investing. If you're investing for the long term, you don't time the market. You give a little bit on a consistent basis, and that's where your build comes from. And that's the biggest mistake I think people make right now. They're trying to time the real estate market. Well, if we've been in the real estate market for 10 years and 32 years respectively, and we can't figure out what's going on, what makes you think that you as a consumer are going to suddenly find the holy grail of and make that perfect timing? And I think that's a big mistake that buyers make.
Yeah. I don't know who to credit for this statement, but I was always taught time in the market is better than timing the market.
Yes.
Because we don't know when it's going to change. If I said in a year with struggling interest rates, we know mortgage rates aren't coming down, and there's an election cycle, say, Brian, how do you think the market's going to be this fall? Would have said, yeah, don't finish any spec homes in the fall. You're playing for summer, and once you're past summer, just start playing for the spring. Don't worry about building homes in the fall.
Right.
Uh, I built because I didn't want to slow down the projects we already had going. That would be silly. And we ended up finishing a bunch of homes in September and October in the thick of the election, and predictably, it was painfully slow. Showings were down. It wasn't happening. But then as soon as the election was over, we got through Thanksgiving, and then in 3 weeks, sold 90% of my inventory. The buyers came out of the woodwork, and there's been a flurry of activity. And, if I had overanalyzed it, I wouldn't have had anything to sell.
Right.
So I try not to think too hard about these things, but I think generally speaking, a lot of people are concerned about, Wall Street manipulation and interaction with the market, whether that's, Lennar starting a new joint venture with BlackRock to build communities for rent and keeping those things off the market. And, there's a lot of those groups, private equity groups, that are just building neighborhoods and keeping them as long-term investments. And the stat is somewhere around, you know the real number here, but something like 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 homes in a certain price range were bought by investors, not by owner occupants over the past couple of years.
Right. Right.
Do you know the real number there?
I don't know the actual number. I know that BlackRock is at a point where they own about 1% of homes in the United States. And when you figure that 64% of people in the U.S. own their own home, BlackRock is one of those in the alternate universe that is building with those. So as you look at that and you look at what, the Lennar had their annual or their quarterly call some earlier this week, and the CEO was talking about the fact of how many cuts they had to make in order to keep transactions moving in the fourth quarter of 2024, and told investors be ready to take a hit in the first quarter of 2025. And we've seen a lot of builder stocks that have actually gone down because of those projections. And then on top of that, you also have the multifamily atmosphere is dead in the water right now in terms of multifamily starts across the country. It's literally non-existent statistically. And that's going to create an interesting hole in the market sometime in the next 12 to 24 months, when those that were started in the fourth quarter of 2024 and the third quarter of 2024, they're not being completed in that time frame, which they would be. So there's going to be a movement where apartment rentals go way up, and they're going to do it very quickly because inventory of available new apartments is going to drop substantially. I think it's going to be interesting to watch that trend and how it affects home buying, because right now in about 56 markets that we track, it's actually a better decision to rent rather than to buy right now because prices have gone up so much. But 2 years from now, that's going to be a whole different ball game because we've seen the pricing level off. Logan Matashami from Housing Wire was talking about the fact he was predicting 4.5% increase this year. He's backed that off to about 2.3, which is about what we're seeing here in the Triangle. We're going to see a little bit over 1.8, 1.9 to 2.5 for the most part. There are going to be some pockets that are a little bit higher, but that's kind of a median across the central North Carolina market. But if you're looking nationally and you're looking at the trends there, there's a lot of places that have lost value. You know, Austin, Texas for 18 months basically lost about 18% of total value. Now it's come back a little bit in Q3 and Q4 24. And we expect that to
Happened in
continue.
a lot of those overheated markets.
Absolutely. Well, and
Denver.
I think a lot of that was an overbuilt market too. I think a lot of the national home builders like Austin, 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 let's get there. And they start coming out of the ground with anything and everything. And now all of a sudden the market's oversaturated. The same thing that happened, by the way, in 2005 and 6 that caused the Great Recession. It was just on a national level. Now we're seeing pockets rather than consistencies across the country. So I think that'll be what I'm watching in terms of the bigger picture real estate market, is because rents are going to increase between Q4 25 and Q4 of 26 because there are so few multifamily housing starts. Because you think about it, one housing start in each community in the Triangle. If you don't build an apartment complex in Wake Forest, an apartment complex in Cary, an apartment complex in Durham, an apartment complex in Briar Creek, if you don't do that, these 67 people a day moving to Wake County don't have anywhere to live. And although we've seen a doubling of the inventory on the Triangle MLS from around 4,000 at the beginning of the year up to about 8,000 towards the end of the year, we're back down around 7,600 right now in December. But if you look at that and you look at what the market's doing, the average home is sitting on the market 60 to 65 days now once it's priced correctly. And we're seeing about 30% of homes on the market that are having price reductions. So if you've been on the market 30 days and you make a price reduction, the clock resets for your median days and average days on the market because you're in a new position. And I think that's what a lot of home buyers or home sellers forget. And the buyers have more choices than they used to have. And if they make an offer on one listing that's $2,000, $3,000 below list price, and the seller won't even negotiate on it, they're going to go down the street and find somebody that is willing to negotiate. So and then you've probably seen, one of the things that I wanted to get in with you is the difference in price between resale homes and new construction. Because in our market, it's generally been about a 16% premium to purchase new construction versus purchasing resale. But when you look at the average age of a home in the Raleigh market and Wake County in our area, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and the surrounding metro area, the average home is now over 40 years old. And when you look at that and think about, okay, I have the option of paying $450,000 for this resale home that probably needs $50,000 to $60,000 of work, or I can go buy new construction that may be a little bit less square footage, and it's going to cost me $100,000 more, but I won't have the replacement of the systems like the HVAC, the water heater, all of the major systems of a house that need to be redone every 8 to 15 years. And so what we've seen, if the new construction was up here 3 years ago and the resale was here, what's happened is these two have come together and there's less than a 3% premium on new construction right now. How does that change your mindset as a home builder? Are you trying to when you're doing a market analysis or you're figuring out what product to come out of the ground with, I'm assuming you're doing a market analysis and looking what's selling in the area. Are you comparing yourself to resale to be able to say, I can beat that? What goes into the mindset of the builder in that process?
Oh yeah, and this is super interesting. And one disclaimer I'll put in there is I'm not a subdivision builder. I'm what's called an infill builder. I buy a lot that's ready and put a house on it.
Got it.
The developer where I'm buying, a tract of land and entitling it and building 100 homes in a neighborhood. When you're
Yes.
doing that, you hire a smart guy like Brian Pate or somebody else to tell you the demographics, who are the buyers who want to live in Northwest Youngsville, and
Mhm.
what's the home that they want. So I can make a product that can competitively match the buyers and find some little niche for myself, or just build a mainstream product I know will move. And whatever I do, I've got to be able to sell 100 of them or 200 or 300 of them.
Right.
Uh, what I do is I buy a lot wherever I find it, Smithfield, Dunn, Burlington, wherever it might be in that kind of radius around the triangle. And the first thing I have to do is I have to match and make sense with what's around me. So if you're building in downtown Raleigh and downtown Durham, you can do this high-end urban infill thing where you're doing modern stuff and you way oversized. You got a 3,400 square foot 3-story modern home with a roof deck between two old 1,200 square foot ranches. You can't do that in Dunn. You can't do
Yes.
that in Angier and stuff like that. So I have to first try and think about what is going to physically make sense on this lot. Uh, if I'm surrounded by 1,500 square foot homes, I build a 1,500 square foot home. If I'm surrounded by uh, everything new construction in the area has a 1-car garage, I try and have a 1-car garage. I want to build what the market has shown buyers are purchasing, and something that aesthetically fits in. I also try and choose a plan with a front face, a front elevation that makes sense with the neighbors' homes. It's not super modern or goofy looking, or a shotgun style deep house that's very skinny and very deep in a
Mhm.
neighborhood where everything else is wide ranches. So, there's just an eye test first of what I do. And then uh, we look at running comps for a few options that are on the table there. So I'll look at one of those lots and say, okay, I can build 1,200 square feet, 1,400 square feet, or 1,600 square feet. And what I generally find is there's a minimum price threshold for the area. Like, for instance, everything sells over 250. So you can build a little bit smaller and have a higher dollar per square foot.
Mhm.
But yeah, I basically look at it and say, what is for sale and what is sold in this area? Because that's my competition. I can't way overshoot. If a 250K buyer comes to the market, uh, am I their only choice? Am I one of 5? Am I one of 40? What am I competing with, and how much do I have to stand out versus just giving a practical alternative?
So when you're looking at that competition, you're basically it's really determined on a case by case basis because of the
That's right.
infill projects, because that is a significantly different project going into a single lot in an area that's, you may have areas that are 1970s and 1980s ranches that a lot of millennials have gone in and they've remodeled the house, but you may be going in, do a tear down, and then build something brand new that has to mesh with the neighborhood, I think is the best way to describe it.
That's
And
right.
it sounds like that's probably your biggest challenge from a business perspective, is identifying who's my buyer, what are the necessities, what are they looking at in this neighborhood that's offered, and how can I match that and provide for those needs that are necessity, while adding a few of the little bells and whistles or wants that people have.
Yeah, it's a really good, actually, it's made me really good at identifying highest and best use.
Hmm.
Uh, and a lot of people probably haven't heard that term since real estate school. Uh, but the point is, and this really resonated for me over the past year or two as I've started buying a lot of land and building a lot of homes. Highest and best use is the use for the land that gives you the highest land value, not the highest total value. Because if highest and best use was total value, then I should decide that every lot should have a $10 million McMansion on it.
Hmm.
I should just build 18,000 square feet on every property because that's the highest value. But the truth is, when you actually put the math to it, you say, okay, well, if I build that, I'm going to lose money. If I build, 10,000 square feet, I'm still going to lose money. If I build 3,000 square feet, I might have a shot to break even. And eventually you find the product, the price point, the finish level that makes sense for that property.
Right.
That gets you the highest value of the land, which is usually, the price of the land plus whatever your profit margin is going to be.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. So we're about 35 minutes in here. What have I not asked you that you want to talk about? Everybody comes on's got something they want to discuss, and I love hearing your thoughts. So I'm just going to kind of open it up and let you lead here.
Let's talk about buyer agent commissions.
Sure, let's talk about it.
Oh gosh, what a shitstorm over the past. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been going on forever. I remember in real estate school, I was in HPW real estate school, and they were like, you know, just warning you guys, colluding on commission is antitrust. Like, you're probably going to charge 6%. 6% is probably going to be your fee. It's what most people charge if you do a third-party independent analysis. You're all going to do 6%, but you're not colluding, and we're not talking about it, okay? And that's kind of how it's always been. And now all of a sudden, some fat cat lawyers got involved. I mean, what happened there? Like, how did we get to that settlement? Because it was not somebody sticking up for the little guy.
No, absolutely. Well, the reason that we settled is because the judgment was for about $1.7 billion, and Missouri state law, in order to appeal a case like that, you have to deposit 3 times the amount into an escrow account, and NAR didn't have the cash to be able to do that. So that's part of the reason. I think another part of the reason is just because they wanted to put this behind us. But it's very interesting. If you look at what was agreed upon and what we started adjusting to back in the summer and what was approved back in November, it's a little bit different because North Carolina Association of Realtors came out with a couple of forms. We've got the form, I think it's 770, that if you're offering a bonus on your listing, if I've only contracted for a 2% buyer's agent compensation and you're offering 3%, we have a form in North Carolina 770 that we were able to use in order to raise the commission and disclose to the buyer that we were getting paid more than that. Well, the final settlement says that we're not allowed to raise our compensation once you've got it agreed to in writing. So are we going to be advised to use that form? I haven't heard the Board of Realtors, the North Carolina Association of Realtors, come out on that. I'm sure the North Carolina Real Estate Commission will have a comment on it, but I think that's going to be a big question down the road. The Department of Justice had been coming after NAR, wanting buyers to pay buyers agents, wanting sellers to pay sellers agents. And that's the rationale that the DOJ had under the Biden administration. And they've been fairly aggressive during the Democrat administrations. If you look back to the Obama administration, all of this stuff started between 2012 and 2016 with the Obama administration and the DOJ. And they didn't like the fact that the NAR, which is traditionally a little bit right-leaning, I wouldn't call it far-right in any way, shape, or form, but it is a small business organization, basically, that represents small business owners like you and me. And I think the Department of Justice was operating, trying to limit some of the policies that allowed things to happen. It'll be interesting with the Trump administration coming in January 20th of next year, in just a little over 30 days here, actually 1 month from today, as a matter of fact. I think it'll be interesting to see the shift from the Department of Justice with that. I think we're probably safe for another 4 years, but I think that there's going to eventually, when a Democrat gets elected at the presidential level again, I think that will change the way the DOJ is looking at things. And it's almost been, and this is my word, not anybody else's, this is Brian's opinion, but the DOJ has somewhat been weaponized against the National Association of Realtors. So,
well, it's not just your opinion. Gary Keller's, I've heard him speak those words out of his mouth.
Gotcha. I haven't heard him say that, but I think a lot of people feel that way. It's like, and as we've learned, as I know you learned from Jay, as I learned from Jay, we talked about Jay Crow earlier. When you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. And if you say yes to the buyers having to pay the buyer's agent commission out of pocket, then that means the buyer's going to have less money to put down on the house, which means we're delaying ownership. If we looked at the annual numbers from the National Association of Realtors report this year on buyers and sellers, the average age of the buyer this year, the average age of the first-time home buyer was 38 years old. Well, that's 10 years older than it was 25 years ago. And part of that is because of the fact that people can't save enough to be able to pay for the down payment, much less add on the compensation. So how are we going to get that in? I'm guessing that you're probably seeing offers that include a sale price, but they probably have a concession of some type, or you're offering some kind of compensation. Again, you can advertise that anywhere you want, except for on the MLS. And that's where the big change has come in.
Yeah, it's yeah, so I just made a website, familybuildingco.com/2.5. Guess what it says? The agents get 2.5%.
Yeah,
So
and as a company, you can do that. But on the board of realtors, I can put that on my own personal website that we pay X number of dollars. But because I'm listing with different people, I have one seller that's willing to pay compensation. I have one that's not willing to pay. I have one that says, "Well, I'll pay a flat fee of 10 grand," and another that says, "I'll pay 2.25%." So I can't put that kind of a blanket statement on my website. So what I'm doing, if you make an appointment to show one of my listings as an agent, or if you are an unrepresented buyer that just wants information, I have a whole bunch of data in a Google Drive, and I just create a short link to it, and I send that out for anybody that has an inquiry. And it's got the compensation agreement that's inside of there with what we have agreed to. I think a lot of agents are making this a lot more complicated than it has to be. It's basically treating business like you're doing a for sale by owner. You're calling the seller. Are you interested in cooperating with a buyer's agent? If so, are you willing to pay a buyer's agent compensation? Whatever their answer is, you go back to the buyer and you say, here's their answer. If they're not willing to pay, do you want to still go look at the property because you would be then liable for the payment? If they are willing to pay, here's what they're willing to pay. And if there's a gap in that compensation, then the buyer may be responsible for some or all of that gap. I think as long as we just think of it as a for sale by owner transaction and go about it the same way, it makes things a lot simpler. But I've heard so many agents that are in panic mode, and to be quite honest with you, it's really not necessary. For the majority of agents, I would tell you that 90% of the transactions are no different. The only thing that's changed is, God forbid, you actually have to pick up the phone or send an email and communicate with the listing agent as to what they're offering.
oh gosh, and agents are going to have to answer the phone, like they
Well,
can't just.
yeah,
What pet peeve, millennial pet peeve?
give it to me.
I hate when somebody calls me and I can't answer because I'm doing something. I'm in a meeting. I'm on the phone, and so they leave me a message, even though my message says just send me a text on what you need.
Right.
And they leave me a message, or they send me a text, or usually they do both. And the message is, "Hey, call me."
Yes.
This is my millennial pet peeve. I know that you are calling to tell me something I don't want to hear, and you want to hear my live reaction to it. And you are putting my wall up. When I call you back, I'm ready to defend.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I think it's that way with everybody. The worst two things that a husband can hear is, we need to talk about something. And it's the same way in business. So and what I try to do is, and I do that too. I'm guilty of that. I'm an early generation Xer here, but if I call you, I'm going to leave you a voicemail message. Hey, it's Brian. I want to talk to you about this, and this, and then I'll send a text, left you a voicemail, take a listen, and then call me. And I think it depends on what I think we as agents that work with the public, we're the ones that have to be the chameleon. And you're the same way as the builder. You've got to adjust. You may have one buyer that's really anal retentive and another buyer that's, if you ask them to paint a 16-foot wall, they'd find a 16-foot roller and go over it once. So I think that we have to learn to adjust. And I think that's where the cream is going to rise to the top over the next couple of years. I think you're going to see a massive shift in the lists of who the top real estate agents are in different markets, because I don't care if you've been in the business 10 years, 25 years, 30 years, whatever it may be. Everybody was new to the business in 2020, thanks to the pandemic. Everybody had to make adjustments. The laws are the same, but the way we do business is different now. And what the consumers are expecting is different. We have to have situations like HGTV where Joe and Julie come to the show, and he's a bar back, and she's arranges flowers for a local florist, and they have a budget of $800,000. It just doesn't happen that way. And I think the public is the one that's going to suffer for that. But we as the licensees are the ones that have to make that adjustment and be able to explain what's going on in the market and identify what our value proposition is and what we're bringing to the table that can help people in this situation to be able to justify what the public sees as a massive overpayment of compensation for the services provided.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that because I've got some theories.
Go for it.
Agents, if you rewind to, I'm not trying to date anybody here, but my parents were kids in the 60s.
Okay.
Back then, a real estate agent making 3% on 6% listings or 3% either side could make a modest living. It was a decent middle class job. It was not heralded, but it was not looked down upon either. It wasn't dirty car salesman. It was just a thing people could do.
Right.
And but what happens when you're a commission based percentage thing, run 60 years through time, wages grow between 1% and 2% a year. You get your 2% raise if you did a good job, and home prices go up 4 and 5%. And now real estate agents, ones who sell a decent volume of property, make way more than the average American. And there's a feeling that's overpaid. I mean, someone's like, okay, I'm buying an $800,000 house. It's my third house. I know what I'm doing. Why the hell are you getting $24,000 to help me write my contract when it's the same work that goes into the $150K deal, and that person's harder to work with?
Right. Exactly.
That's kind of the source of it is it's appreciation and staying on a percentage deal. It's been great for realtors. And I don't have a problem. I know I'm paying commissions when I sell a house, when I build one and sell it. So I price it in. The free market is taking care of that. If I didn't have to pay commissions, I could pay more for the land, and then, more land supply would come up and get gobbled up. It all shakes out over time. What drives me nuts about the way the buyer agent commission thing has been, and still, it's not like the market's adjusted. I'm still expected to pay 2.5% whether I want to or not. I don't, as a frequent seller, I don't really have the freedom of having an opinion there, because if I don't do it, I'll be barbecued.
Right.
I'll be out of business if I decided I didn't want to do it. I work with so many different buyer agents. I mean, I have, people from all over the market, people from outside the market, mega agents, team members, solo agents, people with big firms, people with small firms. And they all make the same amount of money. I pay 2.5%. Let's just say I do a $250K sale, $6,250 I pay to a buyer agent. Some buyer agents are amazing to work with. They take workload off of me and off the listing agent. They interact with their client. They stay on top of the closing attorney and the lender to make sure all the documents are flowing, the approvals are in place, the appraisal's been ordered, the home inspection is dealt with. They get the forms and contracts filled out correctly. They are an advocate for their client, but also for a positive relationship. And they come seeking win-win solutions, and we have an amazing deal. And I'm thankful for those humans, and I feel like I'm getting a steal, getting to pay them 2.5% to make that sale happen.
Sure.
And then there's the other buyer agent who everything's an emergency. They hardly know how to do the paperwork, and everything goes to a fight. The negotiation is adversarial. The first time we meet the buyers is adversarial. Every time the home inspector finds something on the report we need to take care of, it's because we suck and we did a bad job, and we have to fix it all. It's under freaking warranty. We don't have to be like this.
Right.
But that jackass agent gets the same money as the amazing one. And so over time, it works for me paying 2.5%, but I wish I could pay more to the good ones and less to the shitty ones.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I was reading an article a while back in the Wall Street Journal, and they were doing a story on all the NAR settlement stuff with the Seitzer Burnett case. And the Wall Street Journal, in this particular article, said 75% of the real estate licensees in the United States are not equipped to handle a transaction when it goes south. They don't have the negotiating skills. They don't have the basic knowledge of something like a septic system being malfunctioning or a well coming up. They don't know how to shock a well. They don't know where to find the septic permit. They don't know where to go to find the book of maps and actually research. They don't even log into the Register of Deeds to at least print off a copy of the deed to see who the legal owner of the property is before they actually fill out the listing paperwork. I think that's a real indicator. And when you look at it and you look nationally and you see that only about 17% of licensees nationally has sold more than one house. Think about that number. Only less than 1 out of every 5 real estate licensees in the country has sold more than one house in 2024. And this is again from Logan Monashami from Housing Wire and Lance Lambert from Resi Club. But when you look at those numbers, folks, and you think about that, yet the general public only interviews one real estate agent. They go with the first person that they meet with, or God forbid, they go with their cousin who just got his real estate license and hasn't done a single transaction yet. You know, I know John and Karen Stevenson, if you're listening, they were my very first client in August of 1993. And in spite of me, they were able to buy their first home at 7208 Bramblewood. I'll never forget that one. But in spite of me, they completed that transaction. It was such a poor transaction. They've never sold that house. I guess that's indicative of the job that I did, but I was not qualified to handle that. And I was leaning on, I remember I had a couple of mentors, David Huffine and Jerry Miller, took very good care of me, walked me through every single step so I knew what I was doing. And that's the competency level that we have with a lot of agents, especially those that have been inactive for a while, have their license inactive. They haven't actively sold because they're doing other things. And then all of a sudden they decide to go active so that they can sell a friend's house so they can make big money on that $600,000 listing. That's not the way real estate should be done. Real estate is a full contact sport. It is a people business, and you have to take care of the clients, and you have to provide some level of white glove service in order to keep people coming back and to get those referrals. And the average agent simply doesn't do that. And the reason that people hate realtors is because they have the experience with the 80% of the agents that don't do that. But the ones that have the experience with the producing agents that get things done and provide those services, they will happily recommend them to anyone else.
Yeah. That raise in agent compensation has also led to the growth of teams, because all of a sudden there's enough money to split and make everybody happy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You know, you're talking about $400,000 house brings a $10,000 to $12,000 commission. All of a sudden there's a path to saying, okay, I can run a business and a buyer agent can do this. And even if they get $3,000 or $4,000, they can make a living making that commission per sale with some volume. And now we have mega teams, not just teams, but mega teams of, hundreds or thousands of people. And kind of to your point there, I've worked with the big teams and the small teams and the solos. The service level is different, usually in a negative way on the mega team. It is a transaction factory. You speak with the mega agent, they get the deal put together and agreed to terms. And then you never hear from them again because it's with the transaction coordinator, the listing coordinator, the client care person, whatever it is. And you can tell you're not being watched and supervised by the mega agent and until an offer comes in or someone gives some feedback or something. But that is also a unique problem that spun out of the agent commission upward spiral.
Agreed. And I remember, and I'm going to ask you a question here in a second, get your opinion. But when I had my team, I had anywhere between 12 to 15 people at the peak. And we were doing, we were one of the top 25 teams in the entire triangle. We were doing 50, 60, $70 million a year in real estate. but I was working 75 hours a week, and most of it was managing other people. And I didn't know the names, much less the faces of any of our clients that were not the sellers that I had met with face to face. And even though I'd met with them face to face, I was never touching them again after that. So that's part of the reason that I finally went out on my own. I let attrition take my team out eventually. So let me ask you a question. Here's my closing question for you today, Matt.
Yep.
Let's talk about these mega teams and the fact that the rainmaker agent is the one that gets credit for all of those sales. And so the rainmaker gets to advertise that Joe Blow sold $650 million worth of real estate this year, when Joe Blow probably didn't meet with but maybe 3 or 4 clients all year long. And it was all of the quote unquote minions on the team, for lack of a better term, that actually produced all those transactions. Should it be legal for somebody like that to advertise that they did all of those transactions, or should they be focusing on the team doing those number of transactions? I'd love to get your take on this.
Yeah, it should be team. And there are places where it happens that way. It's a function of the MLS. And so if you go down to Charlotte, you have 3 levels of participation in the MLS in what's called canopy.
Yep.
You've got brokerage, how many people, the license affiliation, then you've got team affiliation, then you've got individual. So Matt Szalecki on the Brian Pate team, if we sell a house, the house goes under all 3.
Right.
So people know what I sold. You have tracking of the team without taking credit and keeping me from getting credit. And the brokerage has the same thing. And the Triangle MLS, which I refuse to call by its new name, has not done that. And I don't know why. It seems like the easiest thing in the world to plug in. I don't know if I doubt there's mega agent collusion to prevent that so people can falsely take credit. I think it's just laziness and tone deafness to the market.
Yeah, I've been asking for that for years, because I think that person that sells 2 or 3 houses a year with that team should actually get credit for their production. And the way that the current MLS here in the Triangle market does it, it looks like that person's never produced, which skews some of our statistical data. You know, when we talk about the fact that in the Triangle MLS, only 13% of agents have created more than 1 transaction this year. Well, that's because you've got mega teams that have hundreds of people on them. In reality, it's probably somewhere around 35 to 40% of agents that have actually done that. But it does skew the numbers when we don't have the ability to break down that data. And one of the things, you know, the Real Estate Commission's done a really good job over the last couple of years of getting us a lot more data and statistical analysis. We now know the average age of the real estate licensee in the state. We know the average level of experience. They're tracking what percentages brokers in charge versus general brokerage agents and things like that. It's amazing to me that the system that we use does not allow that. But I think I think their focus recently, at least for the last year and a half, as they've made this transition, is the consumer facing part of their website, trying to draw those leads in and trying to get the consumer to look at Dorify as a local Zillow, if you will, for lack of a better term. And I think it's very difficult for a local regional MLS like that to do that and compete with Zillow, who, according to statistical analysis, 83% of the people in the country that are going to buy a house are going to hit Zillow at some point in the process. They're not thinking of Dorify because it's not a national brand. It's not even a regional brand at this point. Most agents still call it the Triangle MLS even, rather than calling it Dorify. So I tried to behave and at least help out with the branding part of it like that, but I still refer to it as the Triangle MLS area when I'm talking about statistical data.
You know what I refer to it as?
Tell me.
Deplorify.
Deplorify. I love it. I love it. All right. That's a good one to end on, Matt. Thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate you giving us your time. Before we go, Matt, give us your contact information for Family Building Company so we can hit that if anybody that's watching needs some help.
Yep. Familybuildingco.com. All my contact info is on there. You can see our available homes, read a little bit about our story, learn about our first time buyer program, learn how agents, investors, anybody can work with us. So just find me there.
Outstanding. Matt, thanks again for your time. We'll see you next time on the Pulse of Real Estate.